Okay, let's dive in. We're heading back, way back to the 5th century BC. We're going to meet someone who, well, wasn't a famous general or a king, but he completely changed how we all think about the past.
Absolutely. We're talking about Herodotus of Halicarnassus. You really can't overstate his importance. He's basically the father of...
And what's amazing is his background, right? Born around 484 BC, rich family, educated. He could have just chilled.
He absolutely could have lived a comfortable life, but instead he did something totally unheard of back then. He left the safety of his home, which ironically was actually under Persian control at the time.
He just walked away.
Pretty much. He decided to become this global investigator for 8 years straight.
8 years. I find that incredible. A wealthy guy just decides to wander the ancient world, putting himself out there.
And he covered serious ground. I mean, ancient Greece, obviously, but also deep into the Persian Empire, down the Nile in Egypt, Babylon, possibly even further south towards Ethiopia.
It wasn't just tourism, though. He had a goal, a question driving.
Exactly. It was a massive intellectual mission. The big question of his time was, why? Why all this fighting between Greeks and especially the Persians?
He wanted to find the origin story of that conflict.
He did. He wanted to trace it right back to the very beginning, what he called the aichia, the cause, the reason, maybe even the original sin that set it all off. Yeah. He was trying to map out cause and effect in human history.
And all that travel, all that digging led to the history.
The absolute masterpieces of world literature. And think about the validation he got presenting it to the Athenian assembly.
And they gave him, what was a crazy amount of gold?
250 kilograms of pure gold. It was a massive...
Wow, that's serious recognition.
It showed they understood this was something completely new. He wasn't just writing down old myths. He was, trying to check facts, talk to different people, compare stories, analyze why cultures were different.
So for this deep dive, we're basically following his journey through his own writing, looking at the stories and, frankly, the often bizarre details he picked up trying to find the roots of the Greco-Persian Wars.
Exactly. Let's see where he decided to start his investigation. It's actually quite telling.
Okay, so Herodotus, trying to be objective, doesn't start with the Greek side. Where does he go first?
He goes straight to the heart of the supposed Susa, the Persian winter capital. He talks to Persian scholars, priests, whoever would share He asks them, how did this all begin?
And what's the Persian version of patient zero for this conflict?
According to the Persians Herodotus spoke to, it all started generations before the Trojan War and the first culprits, not the Greeks, but the Phoenicians.
The Phoenicians, okay.
Yeah. The Persians claimed Phoenician traders sailed into Argos, a major city in what would become Greece, and they just straight up kidnapped the king's daughter, Io.
Kidnapped her, just like that.
Snatched her and sailed away with her to Egypt. That, for the Persian original crime. Act 1.
So it doesn't start as this grand clash of empires, but more like a gangster movie. A cycle of kidnapping and revenge.
Exactly. Very personal, very tit for tat. The Persians felt this kidnapping demanded a response, to balance the scales.
So the Greeks then retaliate.
That's the Persian account. They claim the Greeks later sailed to Tyre on the Phoenician coast and kidnapped Europa, the daughter of the Phoenician king there.
Okay, so now it's 1-1. Even Stevens, according to the Persians.
Right. Score settled. Theoretically. But then the Persians say the Greeks went too far. They escalated things.
How? What did they do next?
They got a warship, sailed way out to Colchis on the Black Sea, and kidnapped the king's daughter, Medea.
Medea? Okay, but Colchis wasn't Phoenician, right?
No, but in this growing us versus them mentality, all that mattered was that she was non-Greek. So when the Colchian king demanded Medea back, plus damages, the Greeks refused.
And their justification?
They pointed back to the first kidnapping, Io. They said, basically, you guys never compensated us for Io, so why should we compensate you for Medea?
So the Persians see this as the Greeks breaking the pattern. Now the Greeks are ahead. 2 kidnappings to 1, in their view.
Precise. The Persians start seeing the Greeks as the habitual aggressor, the ones always taking things too far, which, conveniently for them, justifies their own later actions.
Like Paris stealing Helen.
Exact. The Persians argued that Paris taking Helen was their attempt to finally even the score again. But when the Greeks demanded Helen back, Paris refused, using the Medea case as his precedent. You didn't give Medea back, why should I give Helen?
And that, in the Persian narrative, is what leads to the Trojan War.
Right. The Greeks raise this huge army, sail over, destroy Troy, kill Priam and Paris. And from that point on, the Persians see the Greeks as implacable enemies who started it all with that first kidnapping of Io and kept
It's a pretty neat narrative, actually. It connects everything back. But Herodotus wasn't just going to take their word for it.
Absolutely not. That's his whole method. He seeks out other perspectives, so he goes and talks to the Phoenicians themselves.
And what did they say? Did they confirm the kidnapping of Io?
Not at all. The Phoenicians gave him a much more, mundane explanation. They said Io wasn't kidnapped. She went willingly.
Willingly? Why?
Apparently, she'd had an affair with Captain, got pregnant, and decided sailing off to Egypt was a better option than facing the scandal back home in Argos.
Wait, serious? So the whole epic feud, root cause of these world-changing wars, might have just been a princess trying to hide an ink pregnant.
That's the kind of stuff Herodotus loves. He presents both sides. The dramatic Persian cycle of revenge and this, slightly embarrassing Phoenician story of personal circumstance.
It shows how messy history is.
Yeah.
It's not always grand causes.
Exactly. And by giving us both accounts, Herodotus is showing that memory and storytelling shape our understanding of conflict just as much as the events themselves. He valued these oral even when they contradicted each other.
That's a really modern way of thinking about history, isn't it?
It truly is. But okay, if these ancient myths about kidnappings were maybe too murky, Herodotus still needed a more concrete starting point for the actual wars he lived through. A non-Greek power actively attacking Greeks.
And that's where Croesus comes in, king of Lydia.
Right. Herodotus leans towards Croesus, who reigned from about 585 to 546 as the first non-Greek ruler to systematically attack and subdue Greek cities.
Specifically the ones on the coast of Asia Minor.
The Ionian and Aeolian cities, yeah. He conquered them one by one and, crucially, forced them to pay tribute. This wasn't just a raid, it was subjugation. For Herodotus, this act of aggression was the more tangible, direct cause of the hostility that eventually blew up into the Greco-Persian.
So Herodotus sets up the story of Croesus like a big Greek tragedy waiting to happen. Wealth, power, but also doom. And he says that doom was actually set in motion generations before Croesus was even born.
Yeah, he traces it back to the fall of the previous dynasty, the Heraclids. It starts with the last king of that line, Candace.
And he had a bit of an obsession.
A major one. He was intensely, almost pathologically proud of his wife. He kept telling his most trusted body Aeges how beautiful.
Okay, bragging is one thing, but Aeges took it further.
Way further. He wasn't satisfied with just telling Aeges. He insisted that Aeges had to see her naked to truly appreciate her. He basically forced Aeges to hide in the royal bedroom and watch the queen undress.
Oh, that is incredibly creepy.
And Herodotus pauses here to really emphasize how big a deal this was. He points out that for non-Greeks, especially royalty, being seen naked by someone who shouldn't see you was a source of profound shame and dishonor. It was an unforgivable violation.
And the queen found out.
She realized Aeges was there. The next morning, she calls Aeges in. She knew Aeges must have arranged, and she gives Aeges this chilling ultimatum.
What was it?
She says, there are two paths for you now. Either you kill the man who shamed me, can take me in the kingdom, or you must die yourself right here, right now, for seeing what you should not have seen.
Wow. Kill the king or die yourself. No middle ground.
None. A classic, tragic dilemma. Aeges, understandably, chose to live. He killed King Candace, married the queen, and seized the throne, ending the Heraclid dynasty.
And starting his own, the Myrmidon dynasty.
Yeah.
But this kind of coup it attracts attention, right? Like divine attention.
Immediately. The Oracle of Delphi got involved. The Oracle confirmed Aeges as the rightful king, sort of legitimizing the coup after the fact. But there was a prophet.
Uh-oh. What did the Oracle say?
The Oracle declared that Candace's shame wouldn't go unavenged. Revenge would come, but not immediately. It would fall upon the fourth generation descendant.
The fourth generation. That's like a ticking time bomb passed down the family line.
Exactly. So Aeges rules, his son Ardys rules, his grandson Sadeates rule. They build up Lydia, make it wealthy, but everyone knows this prophecy is hanging over them. And then comes Croesus.
The fourth generation. Inheriting this immense wealth, Lydia was incredibly rich. Sardis was a major sender, but also inheriting this curse.
Right. He was considered the richest man on earth. Gold just flowed through Sardis. But despite all that wealth, Herodotus paints him as deeply anxious. He's obsessed with one question.
Who is the happiest man in the world?
That's the one. And this leads to probably the most famous story about him, his encounter with Solon.
Solon, the super wise Athenian lawmaker, happens to be traveling through Lydia.
And Croesus, bursting with pride, invites Solon to see his treasury, shows off all his riches, clearly expecting Solon to be dazzled and declare him, Croesus, the happiest man alive.
But Solon doesn't play along.
Not at all. Solon is completely unfazed by the gold. When Croesus finally pops the question, Solon gives him an answer he absolutely did bet.
Who does Solon name first?
He names a guy called Tellus from Athens.
Tellus. Just some random Athenian. Why him?
Solon's reasoning is Tellus wasn't the richest, but he lived well in a prosperous city. He had good sons who survived him. He lived to see his grandchildren. And this is crucial. He died gloriously in battle fighting for Athens and was given a public funeral.
So happiness isn't about wealth. It's about a complete life, a good end.
Exactly. It's about how your whole story finishes. Croesus is annoyed, but pushes Solon, okay, if not me, who's second half.
And Solon picks.
Two brothers, Cleobis and Biton from Arg, they were famous athletes, incredibly.
The ones who pulled their mother's cart.
That's them. The story goes their mother needed to get to the temple of Hera for a fest, but the oxen weren't ready. So Cleobis and Biton harnessed themselves to the cart and pulled her like 4 or 5 miles.
That's amazing dedication.
The crowd cheered them. Their mother was overjoyed. She prayed to the goddess Hera to give her sons the greatest gift a mortal could.
And Hera's gift was
death. That very night, Cleobis and Biton died peacefully they died at the absolute peak of their strength, honor, and piety before any misfortune could touch.
Wow. So the best gift is to die. Happy before things go wrong.
That's Solon's core message to Croesus. Look, your wealth is great now, but fortune is fickle. Anything could happen. You can't call any man truly happy until you see how his life. Call no man happy.
Croesus must have hated that. He basically got told his money doesn't guarantee happiness.
He was furious. He dismissed Solon as a fool. He completely missed the warning. Solon wasn't trying to insult him. He was offering wisdom, trying to temper his pride before fate inevitably struck.
And Herodotus places this conversation right before everything starts to unravel for Croesus, doesn't he?
Perfect. It's the setup. The moral warning delivered just before the tragedy unfolds. Brilliant story. And almost as soon as Solon leaves, Herodotus tells us divine vengeance, or maybe just fate, starts closing in on. It begins with
a really specific, terrifying dream about his son, right?
Yes, about Attis. His favorite son, the capable one, the heir to the throne. Croesus dreams that Attis will be killed by an
iron spearhead. That's oddly precise.
Extreme. And Croesus reacts exactly as you'd expect a powerful, protective father. He goes into overdrive.
What does he do?
First, he pulls Attis out of the army. No more military campaigns for the heir. Then, he removes every single iron weapon, spears, javelins, swords from the men's quarters in the palace, locks them all.
He's trying to control the environment, remove the possibility.
Totally. He even arranges a marriage for Attis, trying to tie him down to a safe domestic life. He's doing everything humanly possible to counteract this prophecy.
But there was another prophecy hanging over him too, wasn't there? About his other son.
Yes, his second son was deaf and mute. And an earlier oracle had told Croesus that he would only hear this son speak for the first time on a day of great disaster.
Okay, so 2 prophecies ticking away. One about Attis and a spearhead. One about the mute son speaking on a terrible day.
Precise. And into this carefully managed, spear-free environment walks a man named Adrastus.
Adrastus. He was refugees, right?
Yeah, a Phrygian nobleman actually related to the Lydian royal family somehow. He arrives at Croesus' court in despair, seeking purification because he'd accidentally killed his own brother.
And Croesus helps him.
Croesus is incredibly kind. He performs the purification rite, gives Adrastus sanctuary, tells him to forget his troubles, and live in the palace as his guest, almost like another son.
So he welcomes the instrument of fate right into his home without realizing it.
The ultimate irony. Then, disaster strikes in the form of a boar hunt.
Right. Some local farmers come complaining about a monstrous wild boar rampaging through their fields on Mount Olympus in Mysia. They beg Croesus to send help.
Naturally, they ask for the best hunters, led by the prince, Attis. Croesus initially terrified because of the dream.
But Attis argues with him, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Using the prophecy itself.
He does. Attis makes a very logical. Father, the dream said I'd be killed by an iron spear. A boar kills with its tusks, not a spearhead. Yeah. What do I have to fear from a boar?
The lawyerly argument against fate.
Exactly. And Croesus, perhaps reluctantly, sees the logic. He agrees to let Attis go. But he asks Adrastus, the man he just purified and sheltered, to go along as Attis's bodyguard. Protect my son from bandits or any other danger.
Oh no. You can see it coming.
It's heartbreaking. During the hunt, the men surround the boar. Adrastus throws his javelin, aiming for the beast.
But he misses.
He messes the boar and hits Attis, kills him instantly with an iron spearhead. The dream fulfilled in the most tragically accidental way possible.
And Adrastus, the man who killed his brother, now kills the son of the king who gave him refuge.
The weight of it is crushing. When they bring Attis's body back, Adrastus throws himself at Croesus' feet, begging to be killed.
How does Croesus react? I mean, the rage, the grief.
It's a remarkable moment. Croesus, despite his devastation, actually forgives Adrastus. He says something like, "You didn't mean this. Some god who warned me this would happen long ago." He sees Adrastus' fate.
That's incredible grace, actually.
It is. But Adrastus can't live with the guilt, having now brought disaster upon the very person who showed him kindness after his first tragedy. That night kills.
Just layers upon layers of tragedy.
Absolutely. So Croesus mourns Attis for 2 years. But then political reality intrudes again. The Persian Empire under Cyrus the Great is rising fast. Cyrus has just conquered the Medes. Croesus starts to worry Lydia is next.
So he decides he needs to act first, strike before he's struck.
Yes. He decides to launch a preemptive war against Persia. But first, he needs guidance. He consults the oracle at Delphi again.
And gets that incredibly famous, incredibly ambiguous answer.
The classic. If Croesus goes to war against Persia, he will destroy a great empire.
And Croesus, full of confidence, maybe still blinded by his wealth and power.
He assumes the oracle means he'll destroy Cyrus's empire. He doesn't even consider it might mean his own. He sends rich gifts to Delphi, makes alliances, and marches out to meet Cyrus.
And the campaign is a disaster.
Complete disaster. Cyrus outmaneuvers him, defeats his army, and captures Sardis, his capital. Croesus himself is taken prisoner.
And Cyrus decides to make an example of the funeral pyre.
Right. Cyrus orders this huge pyre built and has Croesus placed on top, along with 14 young Lydian boys. Whether it was meant as a sacrifice or just a spectacle of execution, we don't.
And it's in this moment, facing death, that the other prophecy kicks.
Exactly. As Croesus is being led to the pyre, or maybe even as he's on it, a Persian soldier, not recognizing the king, moves to kill him. And suddenly, Croesus's deaf-mute son, seeing his father about to be struck down,
He cries out.
He shouts, "Man, do not kill Croesus!" His first words ever, spoken on the day of his father's greatest misfortune, just as the oracle.
And on the pyre itself, flames start to rise.
Croesus remembers. He remembers Solon's words from all those years ago, "Call no man happy," and he says Solon's name aloud 3 times.
Cyrus
hears it, becomes curious, asks his interpreters what Croesus meant. Croesus tells the whole story of Solon's visit and his warning.
And Cyrus is moved by it.
Deeply moved. He sees a reflection of his own potential fate, the instability of fortune. He orders the fire put out immediately. There's even a story that Apollo himself sent a sudden rainstorm to douse the flames because Croesus had been pious.
So Cyrus
Spares him, treats him with honor, and makes Croesus a trusted advisor for the rest. A complete reversal of fortune at the last possible.
And the oracle. Did Croesus ever get clarification?
He did. He later sent messengers back to Delphi, basically asking, was this fair? And the oracle replied, essentially, the great empire you destroyed was your own, as foretold, and your downfall fulfilled the prophecy of Candace's revenge on the 4th generation. You couldn't escape your fate.
So Herodotus uses this whole epic story of Croesus not just to explain the start of the conflict, but as a profound lesson about fate, pride, and the limits of human power.
Absolutely. It's the perfect bridge into understanding the power that eventually overwhelmed Lydia the Persian self.
Okay, so Lydia falls, and the Persian Empire under Cyrus is now the dominant. Herodotus spends a lot of time describing the Persians, trying to help his Greek audience understand these people who became their great adversaries.
And what he shows is a culture that's just profoundly different from the Greek world in almost every aspect, starting with religion.
Right. The Greeks had temples everywhere, statues of their god. The Persians didn't do that.
Not at all. Herodotus says they thought the Greeks were foolish for trying to house gods in buildings or give them human form. The Persians believed their gods were vast, cosmic force, the sky, the sun, the moon, earth, fire, water, wind.
So where did they worship?
On the highest mountain peaks. They'd go up there to offer sacrifices. It was a much more, elemental form of worship.
And they had really strict rules about purity, especially concerning rivers.
Very strict. Rivers were sacred. You absolutely did not spit in a river, wash your hands in it, or urinate. That was deeply offensive to the divine.
Their social customs were pretty distinct, too, like how they decided on law, the drinking part.
Oh, yeah, that's a classic Herodotus detail. He says, Persians valued wine, but they had this specific process for making import. First, they'd debate the issue completely sober.
Okay, makes sense.
Then they'd debate the exact same issue again, completely.
Seriously.
And the decision was only considered valid if they reached the same conclusion, both times sober and drunk.
Wow, that's quite a system. A check against being too rigid or too emotional, maybe.
Possibly. It suggests they valued both rational thought and perhaps some kind of loosened intuition. Fact.
Their justice system also sounded pretty thoughtful, especially the rule about not executing for a first offense.
Right. Herodotus notes that no one, not even a slave, could be put to death for a single crime. They had to weigh the person's entire history of actions against the single offense. It prevented hasty, vengeful judgment.
And they really hated lying and debt.
Those are the 2 most shameful things for a Persian, and they saw a direct link. Being in debt, they believed, inevitably leads to lying, because a debtor is desperate and will say anything.
That's quite insightful, actually. And their greeting showed a clear hierarchy.
Very clear. If you met someone of equal rank, you kissed on the... If they were slightly lower, you kissed on the... But if they were significantly inferior, You had to perform proskynesis, full prostration on the ground.
What's also interesting is how open they were to adopting things from other cultures.
That's a key point Herodotus makes. They weren't rigidly ethnocentric. They saw the Medes had comfortable clothing, so they adopted Median dress. They saw the Egyptians had effective breastplates, so they started using those. If someone else had a good idea, they took it.
Which probably helped them manage such a diverse empire.
Absolutely. It shows a certain pragmatism.
Okay. Moving from Persia proper, Herodotus describes Babylon, which Cyrus conquered after Lydia. He paints this picture of an absolutely immense, almost mythical city.
He really does. 60 miles in circumference, he claims, with walls so thick chariots could race on top, houses 3 or 4 stories high, a deep moat, and these incredible brass gates. Just awe-inspiring scale.
The Babylonian customs were unique, like their healthcare or lack thereof.
Yeah, that's wild. No professional physicians, apparently. If you were sick, you were brought out to the public square, and anyone passing by who had suffered from the same ailment was legally obligated to stop and offer advice based on what worked for them.
Like a citywide crowdsourced medical forum.
Pretty much. Imagine WebMD, but in person and mandated.
And the marriage market. Herodotus calls it their wisest custom, which sounds odd today.
It does sound jarring, but Herodotus explains the logic, at least as he saw it. It was an annual auction run by the state.
They auctioned off women.
The auctioneer would start with the most beautiful young women. Wealthy men would bid high prices.
Okay, that sounds problematic.
But here's the twist. The money raised from selling the conventionally attractive women was then used to provide dowries for the women considered less or those with disability.
So the profits subsidized marriages for women who might otherwise not find husbands or whose families couldn't afford a dowry.
Exact. The system ensured everyone got married. The state basically redistributed the value assigned by the market to create social cohesion. No private marriages were allowed. It was all through this public.
That's a really complex social engineering project, actually, not just a simple market.
Right. Herodotus admired the pragmatism, even if the mechanism strains.
So this amazing city, Babylon, how did Cyrus actually manage to conquer it? They were supposedly well prepared for a long siege.
They were. They mocked Cyrus from the walls. But first, Cyrus had this bizarre encounter with the river Gindus on the way there.
The horse.
Yeah. One of his sacred white horses tried to cross the river, got swept away, and drowned. Cyrus was enraged. He saw it as a personal affront from the river god.
So he punished the river.
He literally stopped his entire military campaign for months and made his army dig 360 channels to disperse the Gindus River's water, basically destroying its power. He vowed to make it so weak that even a woman could cross it without getting her knees. A massive expenditure of effort, purely out of spite against nature.
Okay, so once he finally got to Babylon, what was the plan?
Brilliant strategy. The Euphrates River flowed right through the middle of Babylon, under the city walls. Cyrus had his engineers dig a massive canal and a temporary lake basin upstream
to divert the river.
Exact. They diverted the flow of the Euphrates into the basin, causing the water level within the city to drop dramatically. Suddenly, the riverbed under the walls was shallow enough for his soldiers to wade through.
They just walked in under the gates.
Pretty much. And Herodotus says Babylon was so huge, the people in the outer parts of the city were being captured, while the people in the center were still partying, completely unaware of the city's vastness contributes fall.
Incredible.
Yeah.
But Cyrus, this king of kings, conqueror of Lydia and Babylon, didn't die fighting Greek. He met his end against a much more obscure.
That's right. Far to the northeast against the Massages, a nomadic Scythian-like people.
And Herodotus includes some pretty wild details about their customs, too.
Oh, yeah. He says they drank fermented mare's milk, shared wives in common, and had this particularly grim custom for dealing with the elderly.
The sacrificial feast.
Yes. When someone became too old or infirm, their relatives would kill them, along with some livestock, cook all the meat together, and have it. Herodotus says they considered this the happiest end, better than dying. If someone died of illness, they were just buried, which was seen as less honorable.
Wow. Okay, so Cyrus goes up against these people, led by Queen Tamar.
He does. Initially, he proposes marriage to Tamiris, likely as a way to annex her kingdom peacefully.
She saw through that.
Completely. She told him to stay on his side of the river. Cyrus ignored her, crossed the river, and set a trap based on advice from his Lydian advisor, Croesus.
What was the trap?
Leave behind a lightly guarded camp filled with food and, crucially, lots of strong, undiluted wine. The Massachate weren't used to wine. They mostly drank milk.
So they'd get drunk easily.
Exactly. A contingent of the Massachate army, led by Tamiris' own son, Spargapises, overwhelmed the guards, drank themselves into a stupor, and were easily captured by the...
Tamiris' reaction.
Fury. She sent a message to Cyrus basically saying, "You treacherous snake, you beat my son with wine, not warfare. Give him back, or I swear by the sun I will give you more blood than you."
But Spargapises.
Once he sobered up and realized he'd been captured in such a shameful way, he persuaded Cyrus to release his bonds, then killed killed himself,
making Tamiris even more determined for revenge.
She gathered her full forces and met Cyrus in battle. Herodotus calls it the fiercest battle ever fought between non-Greek. The Persians were utterly defeated, and Cyrus himself.
And Tamiris kept her promise.
She did. She had Cyrus's body found, his head cut off, and then she took a wineskin, filled it with human blood, and thrust Cyrus's head into it, saying, "Though I am alive and have defeated you in battle, you have destroyed me by capturing my son, but now, as I threatened, I give you your fill of blood."
A brutal end for the great conqueror. Herodotus really doesn't shy away from the savagery of warfare.
Not at all. He shows glory, but also immense cruelty and the unpredictable nature of power.
After Cyrus's dramatic end, his son Cambyses II takes over the Persian throne, and his big project is Egypt. Herodotus seems completely fascinated by Egypt.
Oh, absolutely. He travels there, talks to priests, gathers stories, and what he describes is a land that seems deliberately contrary to everything, a world turned upside down.
Like the basic social roles.
Exactly. He notes, women go to the marketplace and handle trade, while men stay home and weep. Women carry burdens on their shoulders. Men carry them on their head. Men urinate squatting. Women stand up.
And their personal habit. Eating outside, but relieving themselves inside.
Yeah, he found that particularly strange. The logic, he was told, was that necessary but unpleasant things should be done in private, while pleasant things like eating could be done in public. It highlights how arbitrary cultural norms are what seemed normal to Egyptians was bizarre to Greeks, and vice versa.
They also had this belief they were the oldest people on earth, didn't they? Until one of their pharaohs did an experiment.
Right, Pharaoh Psammetichus I. He wanted to settle the question definitively, so he took 2 newborn infants and gave them to a shepherd with strict instructions. Never speak a word in their presence, just feed them goat.
The idea being whatever language they spontaneously started speaking would be the original human.
That was the theory. After about 2 years, the kids started repeating a sound. Beko, the shepherd reported. Psammetichus investigated and discovered that bekos was the word for bread in Phrygia.
So the Phrygians were older.
Based on this experiment, the Egyptians conceded that the Phrygians were the older race, and they were second. It's a fascinating glimpse into early linguistic curiosity, even if the methodology is questionable.
Herodotus also details their religious practices and taboos. The priests had intense cleanliness rituals.
Extremely intense. They had to be male, shave their entire bodies, head included, every other day, wear only linen, and wash themselves in cold water several times. They got free food-specific kinds, like beef and goose, plus wine, but couldn't eat fish or beans.
And their reverence for certain animals was extreme, cats and dogs especially.
Hugely important. If a house cat died of natural causes, everyone in the household had to shave their eyebrows as a sign of mourning.
Just the eyebrows for a cat.
Yeah, but if a dog died, they had to shave their entire bodies, including their head. Killing a sacred animal, even accidentally, could be punishable by death. And they mummified loads of animals: cats, dogs, ibises, crocodiles.
The mummification process itself. Herodotus gives details, right? Like different price levels.
He does. He describes the top-tier method in fairly graphic.
How did it work?
They'd use a hooked iron tool inserted through the nostrils to pull out most of the brain. Then make an incision in the flank to remove the internal organs, stomach, intestines, liver, lungs. The cavity was rinsed with palm wine and filled with spices like myrrh and cassia.
And then dried out.
The body was packed in natron, which is a natural salt mixture, for 70 days. This completely desiccated it. After 70 days, they'd wash the body, wrap it meticulously in fine linen strips coated with resin, and often place amulets within the bandages.
And the final step.
The wrapped mummy was placed in a decorated wooden coffin, often human, which was then given back to the family to be stored, usually upright.
It's an incredible amount of effort. Shows how central their beliefs about the afterlife were. Herodotus was also obsessed with the Nile River itself.
He couldn't figure out why it flooded in the summer, which was the opposite of rivers. He heard various Greek theories, like melting snow from mountains in Africa.
But he dismissed that.
Yeah, he thought the idea of snow in hot Africa was ridiculous. His own theory. Well, he thought the winter sun got blown south towards the upper Nile and the sun's heat somehow drew the water, making the river level low. Then in summer, the sun moved north again, releasing...
Okay, not quite right, but shows his attempt at rational explanation. What about the source of the Nile?
He traveled quite far south to Elephantine Island. The priests there told him the source was bottomless springs between Croesus and Moph. They claimed they'd tried to sound the depth with ropes, but the bottom. Herodotus remains skeptical, but ultimately Egypt really was.
And the architectural wonders. He describes things that just boggle the mind. Khufu's Great Pyramid,
He was clearly impressed by the scale, but also notes the cost in human suffering. He says the Egyptians hated Khufu, or Cheops, for closing temples and forcing basically the entire population into labor. 10 years just to build the stone causeway to transport the blocks, and another 20 years for the pyramid itself.
The dimensions he gives are huge.
800 feet square at the base, 800 feet high, made of massive, perfectly fitted, polished stone blocks, none less than 30 feet long. It's staggering.
And he mentions the cost of just the workers' vegetables.
Yeah, he saw an inscription on the pyramid, supposedly, that recorded 1,600 talents of silver spent just on radishes, onions, and garlic for the workforce. A talent was a huge amount of silver. It gives you a sense of the sheer logistics involved.
Then there was the labyrinth. He seemed even more impressed by that.
He said it surpassed even the pyramid, built near a place called Crocodilopolis. It had 2 levels, one above ground, one below, with 3,000 rooms in total, 1,500 on each level.
3,000 rooms.
Insane, right? He said the winding passages of the upper level were bewildering. He wasn't allowed into the underground level because that's where the kings who built it and the sacred crocodiles were entombed.
And Lake Morris, another massive engineering feat.
A huge artificial lake, supposedly hundreds of miles in circumference and very deep, used for irrigation. And in the middle of this artificial lake, the Egyptians built 2 enormous pyramids, each rising hundreds of feet out of the water, topped with colossal seated statues.
The Egyptians were clearly masters of monument. This is the world Cambyses decides to invade. What sparked?
Personal insult, according to Herodotus. Cambyses had asked the current pharaoh, Amasis, for his daughter in marriage. Amasis didn't want to send his own daughter, so he tricked Cambyses by sending the daughter of the previous pharaoh.
Cambyses found out.
Oh, yes. And he was furious. Plus, a key Greek mercenary general serving Egypt, Phanes of Halicarnassus, defected to the Persians and gave Cambyses crucial intelligence about the routes across it.
And the Egyptians retaliated against Phanes' family.
In a truly horrific way. Amasis had died by then, and his son Psamtik III was pharaoh. Right before the main battle, Psamtik had Phaemon's sons brought out in front of both armies, slit their throats over a bowl, mixed their blood with wine, and made all his command.
Barbaric. Did it help them win?
Not at all. The Persians won decisively, conquered Memphis, the capital. Cambyses' revenge was brutal. 10 Egyptians killed for every Persian lost.
But his real target was the dead pharaoh Amasis.
Yes. He had Amasis' mummy dragged from its tomb. He ordered it flogged, stabbed, hairs pulled out, just desecrated. And then the ultimate insult, he had it burned.
Which violated both Persian and Egyptian beliefs, right?
Absolutely. Persians revered fire as sacred and wouldn't defile it with a corpse. Egyptians believed fire was a living beast that devoured bodies, preventing passing after. So burning the mummy was taboo for everyone involved. Herodotus sees this act as the beginning of Cambyses' madness.
The madness got worse.
Much worse. He launched a disastrous campaign south against Ethiopia. The army ran out of food completely. Herodotus reports they ate their pack animals, then started eating grass, and finally resorted to cannibalism, choosing 1 man in 10 by lot to be eaten by the others.
Oh my God.
Cambyses had to turn back in disgrace. When he returned to Memphis, the Egyptians were celebrating the discovery of a new Apis bull, a sacred calf believed to be an incarnation of the god Osiris. Cambyses thought they were celebrating his failure.
So he took it out on the bull.
He demanded to see the bull, then drew his dagger and stabbed it in the thigh, mocking the priests for worshipping an animal that would bleed. The bull later died from the wound, a terrible sacrilege.
And this act comes back to haunt him.
In a bizarrely specific way, sometime later while mounting his horse, the cap fell off the sheath of his sword and the exposed blade pierced his own thigh in the exact same spot where he had stabbed.
Seriously?
Yeah.
That's poetic justice almost.
The wound became infected, gangrenous. As he lay dying, news arrived from Persia that his throne had been usurped.
By whom? He had killed his own brother earlier, right? Smyris.
Yes, out of jealousy and paranoia, he'd secretly had his brother Smyris, or Bardia, murdered. Now, 2 Magi brothers, priests or officials, seized power. One of them looked like the dead Prince Smyris and was pretending to be him.
So the real Smyris was dead, but an imposter took the throne.
Exactly. Cambyses, on his deathbed, confessed to the Persian nobles around him that he had killed his brother and warned them that the Smyris currently ruling was an imposter, a magus.
Did they believe him?
No. They thought it was just the ravings of a dying, mad king trying to slander his brother. Cambyses died 20 days after wounding himself, leaving the Persian Empire in the hands of these usurpers.
Okay, so Cambyses dies mad, leaving an imposter on the throne.
Mm-hmm.
How does Persia get back on track? This is where Darius comes in, right?
Right.
One of the nobles who heard Cambyses' confession.
Exactly. But the key figure initially is another nobleman, Otanet. He starts suspecting something's fishy about this new King Smyris. Well, this magus imposter rarely left the palace and never met with with the high nobility. Plus, Otanes remembered that Cyrus the Great had punished one of the Magi brothers years ago for some crime by cutting ear.
Ah, distinguishing feature.
Right. Otanes had a daughter, Phaidame, who was one of the royal wives, passed down from Cambyses. Otanes secretly instructed, next time you're with the king, when he's asleep, feel his head. See if he has
risk.
Very. But she did it. She confirmed. The king had no. Otanes knew then that Cambyses had. This guy was the magus imposter.
So Otane gathers the other nobles.
He brings in 6 other top Persian nobles, including Darius. They form a conspiracy, sneak into the palace, confront the Magi brothers, and kill them both.
And Darius ends up as the new king of kings. How is that decided among the 7 conspirators?
Herodotus gives a famous story, probably legendary, that they agreed whoever's horse neighed first at sunrise the next morning would become. Darius's clever groom supposedly arranged for his horse to neigh first by using a mare's scent.
So maybe a bit of trickery involved in Darius's rise too.
Perhaps. But Darius takes firm control, reorganizes the empire into provinces called satraps, establishes fixed tribute. He's a real empire builder. And Herodotus gives us these amazing descriptions of where all the wealth and resources came from.
Like the gold from India with the giant ants.
Yeah, that's one of his most famous and strange. He describes nomadic tribes living near a place called Caspatyrus in a sandy desert. In this desert live enormous ants, bigger than fox, smaller than dogs.
Giant ants digging for gold.
They burrow underground, throwing up sand rich in gold dust. The Indians have to ride out on fast camels, specifically. A team of 2 males harnessed on either side of a female at birth, supposedly the fat, to collect this gold-rich sand.
Why the camels in the rut?
They have to do it during the hottest part of the day when the ants are underground, because the ants are incredibly fast and fierce and supposedly have an amazing smell. The Indians grab the sand quickly and have to flee before the ants swarm.
Modern scholars think these ants were probably Himalayan marmots, right? Which do dig burrows in gold-bearing soil.
That's the most likely explanation. Herodotus is reporting what he heard, perhaps embellished over distance. Still a great.
And the spices from Arabia. That sounded equally hazardous to collect.
Arabia he calls the last inhabited land to the south, and the only place that produces frankincense, myrrh, cassia, and cinnamon. But getting them wasn't easy.
Winged snakes guarding the frankincense trees.
That's what he reports. Small winged serpents that had to be driven away by burning storax, resin the fumes supposedly repelled them.
And bat-like creatures guarding the cassia.
Yeah, cassia grew in shallow lakes guarded by aggressive, winged creatures resembling bats. The Arabians had to cover their entire bodies, except their eyes, with ox hides for protection while harvesting.
But the cinnamon story is the wildest. How did they get?
Cinnamon sticks, Herodotus says, were used by large birds to build their nests high up on sheer, unclimbable cliff. The Arabians couldn't climb up there. So they devised a cunning plan. They would leave large carcasses of oxen or other animals near the base of the cliff. The birds would fly down, pick up these heavy pieces of meat, and carry them back to their nests.
And the wheat would break the nests.
Exactly. The nests, overloaded with meat, would break apart and fall to the ground, allowing the Arabians to gather the valuable cinnamon. Ingenious, if true.
These stories really emphasize the exoticism and difficulty of attaining these luxury goods.
Okay, so Darius is consolidating power, but then he faced Babylon.
Yes, the Babylonians try to break free from Persian rule again, and they prepare for a long siege with horrifying determination.
The measure they took to conserve food, it's shocking.
It really is. Herodotus says they decided that most women were useless mouths to feed during a siege. So each man chose one woman, his mother, or another he preferred to bake bread, but all the other women in the city were gathered together and strangled.
Unimaginable brutality. To save food, it shows how desperate they were. The siege went on for a long time, nearly 20 months. The Babylonians felt secure behind their walls, even mocking Darius.
With that famous taunt about mules giving birth.
Right. A Babylonian shouted down from the wall, "Why don't you Persians just leave? You'll take Babylon when mules start having foal." Meaning never.
But then the impossible happened.
According to Herodotus, it does. One of Darius's own generals, a nobleman named Zopyrus, finds that one of his own mules has miraculously given birth to a foal.
A sign from the gods.
Zopyrus takes it as exactly that, a sign that Babylon is fated, and he comes up with an incredibly daring self-sacrifice plan.
Self-mutilation.
Yes, he cuts off his own nose and ears, whips himself until he's bloody, and then presents himself to Darius, outlining his plan. Darius is initially horrified, but agrees.
What was the plan?
Zopyrus goes to the gates of Babylon, pretending to be a deserter who has been horribly punished by the cruel King Darius. Babylonians let him in, see his terrible wounds, and believe his story.
And he gains their trust.
Gradually, he leads some successful raids against token Persian forces, prearranged with Darius, becomes a hero in Babylon, and is eventually appointed commander of the city's defenses.
And he betrays them.
When the time is right, he opens 2 of the main gates, letting Darius's army pour into the city. Babylon falls.
Darius's response.
He deals harshly with the leaders, impaling around 3,000 prominent Babylonians. He tears down the city walls to prevent revolts, but then, realizing the city was now severely depopulated, especially of women,
He imports women.
he orders neighboring regions to send tens of thousands. Herodotus says 50,000 to Babylon to restore the population.
Wow. And what about Zopyrus? How did Darius treat him after his sacrifice?
Darius honored him immensely, made him governor of Babylon for life, tax-free, and Herodotus reports Darius often said that he would rather have Zopyrus whole and unharmed than conquer 20 more battles. High praise for his loyalty.
Okay, next major campaign for Darius. Scythia. Why did he go after these nomadic tribes?
Long-standing grudge. Herodotus explains the Scythians had invaded and ruled Media, part of the Persian power base, generations early. Darius wanted payback, cure his northern front, around 513.
But fighting nomads is tricky. They don't have cities to capture.
Exactly. Darius builds this massive bridge of boats across the Danube River, built by his Greek subjects from Ionia, and marches his huge army into Scythian territory. But the Scythians just melt away.
Guerrilla tactics.
Classic nomadic strategy. They refuse pitched battles, they retreat, drawing the Persians deeper and deeper into the vast empty steppe. They burn grasslands, filling wells. There's nothing for the Persians to conquer, nothing.
Darius gets frustrated, sends a message to the Scythian king, Idan-Thirst.
Basically says, stop running, stand and fight like men, or submit and bring me gifts of earth and water.
And Idan-Thyrsus' reply is legendary.
It really is. He sends back a message saying, essentially, we nomads don't fear losing cities or crops because we don't have any. We're not running from you. We're just living our normal nomadic life. If you really want to force us to fight, find the tombs of our ancestors and try to desecrate them. Then you'll see if we fight.
A perfect statement of nomadic defiance. Darius realizes he can't win this way.
He's overextended. Supplies are low. He has to retreat. But getting back to the Danube bridge.
And the Scythians try to get the Ionians guarding the bridge to destroy it and trap Darius.
Yes. The Scythians race ahead, reach the Ionians at the bridge and say, look, Darius is finished. Destroy the bridge. Seize your freedom.
And the Ionians are tempted.
Very tempted. Most of the Ionian leaders want to do it. But one man, Histiaeus, the tyrant of Miletus, argues against it.
Why? What's his argument?
He points out that their power as tyrants in their home cities depends entirely on Persian backing. If Darius falls, the people in their cities will likely overthrow them and establish democracy, self-preservation.
So he convinces them to just pretend to destroy the bridge.
Exactly. They dismantle a small section on the Scythian side, just enough to fool them, but keep the main bridge intact. This allows Darius and the remnants of his army to escape across the Danube when they finally arrive.
And the Scythians feel betrayed by the Greeks.
Utterly. Herodotus says they forever after considered the Ionian Greeks the basest and most cowardly of all free men because they had the chance for freedom but chose slavery out of...
But this is Histiaeus, the one who saved Darius.
Yeah.
He later plays a role in starting the actual Ionian revolt against Persia, doesn't he?
Ironically, yes. Darius keeps Histiaeus at his court in Susa, partly as an honor, partly to keep an eye on him. Histiaeus gets restless and wants to go home. He sends a secret message to his ambitious son-in-law, Aristogoras, back in Miletus.
The message tattooed on the slave's head.
That's the famous story. Shaved the slave's head, tattooed the message revolt, waited for the hair to grow back, then sent the slave to Miletus. Aristogoras shaves the head, gets them.
Though Herodotus also says Aristogoras might have started the revolt anyway because he'd botched a military campaign against the island of Naxos and feared punishment from Darius.
Right, there are multiple possible triggers. Whatever the exact cause, the Ionian cities revolt against Persian rule around 499-498. Aristogoras seeks help from mainland.
Sparta says no.
King Cleomenes of Sparta looks at the map, hears it's a 3-month journey inland to the Persian capital, and basically says, absolutely not. Get out of Sparta before sun. Too far. Too risky.
But Athens?
Yes. After some desperate pleading from Aristogoras, the Athenians vote to send 20 ships. Herodotus calls this decision the beginning of troubles for both Greeks and barbarians.
And the defining act of this Ionian revolt.
The rebels, including the Athenian contingent, march inland and burn Sardis, the former capital of Croesus, now a major Persian administrative center.
Burning Sardis. That feels like a point of no return.
It absolutely was. When Darius hears that Athenians helped burn Sardis, he supposedly asks, who are the Athenians? Then, upon being told, he shoots an arrow into the sky, prays to his god Ahura Mazda for vengeance, and orders a servant to repeat to him 3 times at every meal, Master, remember the Athenians.
The die is cast. The road to Marathon is now open.
Precise. The Ionian revolt ultimately fails, but the burning of Sardis ensures that Darius's wrath will now focus directly on Athens. So now we reach the climax of Herodotus' entire narrative. The great wars themselves, the events that shaped his world and likely spurred his whole...
It starts with Darius' first attempt at revenge for Sardis. He sends his son-in-law Mardon.
Right, around 492 BC, but that expedition is largely a failure. The land army makes some progress in Thrace, but the fleet is wrecked by a violent storm while trying to round the peninsula of Mount Athos. Hundreds of ships lost, thousands of men drowned.
A major setback. But Darius doesn't give up.
No way. He prepares a second invasion, specifically targeting Athens and Eretria, another city that helped the Ice. This time, she puts different commanders in charge, Dates and Artaphernes, and sends the fleet directly across the Aegean.
And this leads to the Battle of Marathon in 490 BC.
Exact. The Persians land at the Bay of Marathon, northeast of Athens. The Athenians march out to meet them. There's a debate among the Athenian generals whether to fight or wait.
And Miltiades makes the crucial argument for fighting immediately.
Yeah. Miltiades knew Persian tactics well, having served with them earlier. He convinces the commander-in-chief, Callimachus, that they must attack now on the plain of Marathon. Why?
The terrain suited the Greek hoplites.
Perfect. The heavily armored Greek infantry fighting in a tight phalanx formation, that wall of shields and spears would be devastating against the more lightly armed Persian infantry and archers on flat ground. The Persians relied on cavalry, but it seems their cavalry wasn't fully deployed or effective at Marathon.
So the Athenians, though, outnumbered maybe 10,000 Athenians and allies against a much larger Persian force they charge.
They charge across the plain, a distance of about a mile, surprising the Persians with their speed and ferocity. Strengthen their flanks, let the center sag slightly, enveloping the Persians who break.
And the result is a stunning Greek victory.
Absolutely decisive. Herodotus gives specific numbers, 6,400 Persians compared to only 109, an astonishingly low number for the victory. Marathon becomes legendary. It proves the mighty Persians.
Darius dies a few years later, still planning another invasion. The task falls to his son, Xerxes.
Xerxes takes the throne, first has to crush a revolt in Egypt, but then Mardonius, the general from the failed first expedition, relentlessly pushes him to avenge Marathon and conquer all of
Xerxes' initial.
Herodotus portrays him as being swayed by dreams and advisors, but eventually he commits to a massive invasion, assembling an army and navy of unprecedented size. Herodotus' numbers are probably exaggerated, but the scale was undoubtedly enormous.
This is the invasion that leads to Thermopylae.
Right. Xerxes marches south through Greece. A small force of allied Greeks, led by King Leonidas of Sparta, decides to make a stand at the narrow coastal pass of Thermopylae, the hot.
Only a few thousand Greeks against Xerxes' horde, including the famous 300 Spartans.
About 7,000 Greeks initially, Herodotus says, including the 300 Spartans under Leonidas. They hold the narrow pass for several days against frontal assault. The terrain negated the Persians' numerical advantage.
Xerxes demands they surrender.
Sends a message. Hand over your arm. Leonidas gives that iconic, laconic Spartan reply. Molenlebe, come and take.
But their stand is ultimately undone by betrayal.
Yes. Herodotus names Aphiel, a local Greek man, who tells Xerxes about a hidden mountain path that bypasses the main Greek position,
allowing the Persians to surround them.
Exactly. When Leonidas realizes they're trapped, he dismisses most of the allied Greek forces, ordering them to retreat and save themselves to fight another day.
But he stays.
He stays, along with his 300 Spartans, plus several hundred Thespians who volunteer to remain, and some Thebans whose loyalty was suspect. They fight to the last man, buying crucial time for the rest of Greece, a heroic sacrifice immortalized in history.
After Thermopylae, Athens itself is evacuated. The naval battle at Salamis becomes.
Themistocles, the brilliant Athenian leader, persuades the allies to risk everything on a naval battle in the narrow straits between the mainland and the island of Salamis, where the evacuated Athenian population is sheltered.
Why the narrow straits?
Same principle as Thermopylae, but on water. Themistocles knows the huge, less maneuverable Persian fleet will be crippled to find space. The smaller, nimbler Greek triremes can ram and outfight them.
He even tricks Xerxes into committing his fleet.
Herodotus tells a story that Themistocles sent a secret message to Xerxes pretending to be a traitor, telling him the Greeks were planning to escape and that Xerxes should attack immediately to trap. Xerxes falls for it.
And the battle is another decisive Greek victory.
A disaster for the Persian navy. Huge loss. Xerxes watches the destruction from a throne set up on the shore. It's a turning point. Xerxes decides to return to Persia, leaving Mardonius in charge of the land army to try and finish the conquest the following year.
Which leads to the final battles in 479 BC, Plataea and Mycere.
Right. Mardonius tries to negotiate, fails, and meets the combined Greek army, led by the Spartan Pausanias near the town of Plataea in Boeotia.
A massive land battle.
The largest land battle of the war. It's hard fought, but the Greeks eventually break the Persian line. Mardonius himself is killed in the fighting, and once their commander falls, the Persian army collapses and is routed. A huge victory.
And on the very same day, supposedly.
On the same day, according to tradition, the remaining Greek fleet attacks the Persian navy beached at Mycere on the coast of Ionia. They land, defeat the Persian troops guarding the ship, and burn the Persian.
So decisive victories on land and sea essentially end the Persian threat to mainland Greece.
Exactly. The invasion is over. The threat is neutralized. And Herodotus, who was just a child maybe 5 years old when Plataea and Mycale happened, grew up in a world defined by these victims. His histories are, in many ways, the explanation of how this seemingly impossible outcome passed.
It's amazing to think that Herodotus didn't just write about conflict. He actually participated in it later in life.
That's right. After his long travels, around 454 BC, he reportedly returned to his hometown, Halicarnasse, and was involved in an uprising that finally overthrew the tyrant Ligdamus.
The same tyrant whose family had driven Herodotus's family into exile and possibly killed his uncle.
The very same. So he wasn't just an observer. He took action against tyranny himself when the
He eventually settled down, not in Athens, but in a Greek colony in southern Italy.
Yes, Thurii. That's likely where he spent his later years, revising and completing the history. And his work's impact was felt almost immediately.
You mentioned the story about Thucydides earlier.
Yeah, the anecdote may be legendary, but telling that when Herodotus gave a public reading of his work at the Olympic Games, a young boy in the audience, named Thucydides, burst into tears, moved by the power of the story. Herodotus supposedly noticed and told the boy's father, "Your son's soul yearns for knowledge."
And Thucydides, of course, went on to write his own great history of the Peloponnesian War, building on, but also reacting against Herodotus' methods.
Absolutely. Herodotus created the genre. He established the idea of history as inquiry. The Greek word historia means inquiry, asking why, gathering evidence, considering different perspectives, analyzing cause and effect.
His work gave the Greeks, and us, so much. A map of the known world at the time.
Detailed accounts of dozens of cultures, Persians, Egyptians, Scythians, Babylonians, preserving customs and beliefs that would otherwise be told. He documented the first great clash of civilization, the rise of the first truly global empire under the...
And he did it all through storytelling, weaving together these grand narratives with incredibly specific, sometimes bizarre human detail.
Which really raises a crucial point. When we look back at huge conflicts like the Greco-Persian Wars, or even conflicts today, we tend to focus on the big picture, the kings, the battles, the treaties.
But Herodotus shows us that maybe the real engines of history are smaller, stranger things.
Exactly. Things like personal shame driving a queen to order regicide, a prophetic dream about a spearhead, the cultural taboo against being seen naked, a misunderstanding about a river god, even the miraculous birth of a mule. These seemingly minor events, these human stories, are what set the whole chain reaction in motion.
It forces you to think differently about cause and effect in history. It's not just geopolitics. It's psychology, culture, religion, fate, acts all tangled together.
He showed that history is profoundly human, messy, and often driven by things we might easily overlook if we only look at the head.
So here's something to think. You've just heard how the father of history is massive all the way to a single kidnap that happened in Trojan. If you had to pinpoint the real starting of a major conflict happened, where would you begin to start with the official statements and the political, or would you look for those small, strange, hidden personal slight, cultural, unexpected that might have actually said, where does the real story